It's been a minute. It's been a minute. Life's been busy. Life's been busy. But today, I'm going to answer a couple questions that I typically, I'm going to just jump right in here, typically get asked quite a bit is, you may notice that those of you that watch that at the end of my videos, I tell you to go watch Uncle Ben Eller, or Andy Wood, Robert Baker, Music Is When, and people like that. Reason I do that is because people say, do I give lessons? Yeah, I do. I have students and I give lessons. The difference as to why I lead them towards people like Andy Wood or Ben Eller is because of, or Robert Baker, is because they teach probably theory and they probably get more in depth as to what you're doing. I grew up in a small town. There's a video that I put out when I first started this channel. I grew up in a place up in the high desert called Phelan, California. And sorry, I try to adjust this just slow. There we go. There he is. And so I didn't have a place to go really to get guitar lessons. There was teachers up there, schools up there, but everything was about 20 minutes away. And the teachers that were up there at the time were guys that taught jazz and blues and stuff like that, maybe a little bit of country. Now I get it. It would have taught me a lot more than I probably know now. But at the time, when you're growing up and you're a teenager and you think that that style doesn't suit what you're looking for. You know, I was busy listening to Randy Rhoads, George Lynch, Rick Emmett, you know, so I was not looking for a guy that wanted to teach me, you know, just stuff that was, you know, I was, you know, obviously wanting to, I was getting into the heavier riffs. So now, looking back at it now, I go, yeah, that was stupid. I should have just taken what I could get and ran with it. I think I do tell the story of I did want to go to GIT. I really wanted to be a studio musician. I didn't know whether I really wanted to be a touring musician. I suppose I would have if that's the road that it would have led me down. But I ended up having a kid and needing to do things to be you know, to pay for that kid. So that got put on hold, and I'm 56 now, and it's still on hold. So, oopsie. Anyway, the whole purpose of me talking about this is because people have asked, do I give, I gave my kids lessons, and you know, there's a big difference when someone like Andy Wood or Ben Eller or people sit down and, you know, and they show you certain things. Those guys can pretty much note or tell you every note they're hitting, if they're playing you know, what mode they're in, the purpose behind, you know, why they're doing it and all that. I'm a basic major minor chord guy. tons of power chords up the wazoo. And you'll have to forgive my dog. He thinks that he can beat up everything in the neighborhood, and he can't. Anyway, so those guys, because of their schooling and their understanding, that's why I kind of tell people, if you want understanding and you want to know why, that's where you go. It's kind of like, the best way I was trying to describe it to my wife this morning, that when it comes to like building a house, there's guys that can draw the plans and draw a really nice house, really good plans, but can't build the house. And there's guys that can build the house that can't draw the plans, right? I see Ben and Andy and Robert Baker and guys like that as they can draw the house, they can build the house. They really impress me because I always wanted to be that. But when you get wrapped up in doing music at night and a day job, school is not there for. So you just keep learning by ear, you know. And I was pointing out to a student the other day, like things that I look back at now, how I play them differently because I've got YouTube and I've got different ways of, you know, viewing things. And, you know, back when I was learning this stuff, I was learning it off of a record, an album, or a cassette tape, and the cassette either broke and you had to tape it back together, or the album would skip and you had to put a nickel on the needle. So I was always learning stuff the hard way, you know, as I was always learning stuff by ear, you know. Stuff like that I was learning by ear, as opposed to when I saw other people play it, they played it, the actual chord structures, not power chords. And that's knowledge, and that's I'm starting to figure that out now. And I do pass it along to students because I, you know, if I learn it, I want to pass it along. But the point behind this video is very simply to put it is the question of, do I teach? I do, but I only teach you the basics. I teach you how to dig the forms and put the foundation down, and anybody wants to teach you the rest of the building, you know, I would guide you in different directions. That said, getting back to being self-taught versus having theory behind you. I think what theory does, and I'm gonna see if I can add Andy and Ben and Robert into this. I think if you put the at, they'll get them. Anyway, it doesn't matter. The difference to me, and maybe they can correct me if, you know, respect your elders if you do see it. No, I was kidding. So is theory, you know how to connect the dots. I think self-taught doesn't mean that you can't do it. You can. You know, there's a lot of guys. Stevie Ray Vaughan was self-taught. Eddie, for the most part, claims of being self-taught. George Lynch, although Eddie knew music because of his piano. Randy Rhoads knew how to write music, and he could sight read. So he knew stuff. But there are lots of guys out there that did it by ear and did it by paying attention to maybe watching the guys around him. So it can be done. It's not that it's unheard of that there's famous guitar players out there that pretty much were naturals. But theory, for me, the way I look at theory is those guys don't get stuck in boxes. They don't get stumbled very easily. In other words, they know what they can and cannot do. I can say by being self-taught, one of the biggest problems I have is I hesitate a lot because I don't know if I can reach for that note or if I could play that, because I'm scared it'll sound off or it won't sound right. Now, that said, people say, why do I play guitars with Floyds a lot? It's super easy if you hit a sour note to dive out of it real quick, or pinch, pick, and bends. But you have to realize when you do that pinch, pick, and bend or that dive bomb to get back into that box or that pattern. So for me, theory is knowing everything from the nut to the bridge. And I believe that really does help you at the end of the day. Your understanding is a lot better than someone who's just kind of winging it. I'm not saying that you can't have a guitar player next to you that can wing it and wing it really good and hang in there with you. I've played with lots of guys throughout what I've done who had gone to school for music. Two of them taught music lessons and knew theory up one side, down the other. And they actually, the one comment I got out of most of those guys was and this is, again, I hope one of these guys sees it and can correct me, but they said the thing that they liked about me was because I was kind of winging it and flying by the seat of my pants, I did things that were unethical. Whereas they said their problem was they knew where they needed to go and their brain told them, I have to go here. And I was going, yeah, I don't have that. I wish I did. That doesn't always ring true, by the way, because there are lots of guys that are Eddie Van Halen for a prime. Some of the stuff he did was unethical. It shouldn't have worked, and it did. Whereas Randy Rhoads, like I say, he was, because of his teaching and because he was a sight reader, his brain said he had to go here. He had to do that, I think it doesn't change that when we hear something and it's written so methodically, it really does make a song. You go listen to Eric Johnson, Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, Richie Kotzen, even Nuno Bettencourt. Just go listen to those guys. Now I get it, Nuno's claims he's a lot self-taught too, but they write methodically and they think things through. Andy Wood, Ben Eller, when you watch him play, you could tell his brain is like 2 steps ahead of where he's going. That makes, when you write music, really good because you're thinking it through all the time, constantly. I'm not saying winging it isn't cool too, because it is. Again, I'm not going to insult myself for the amount of years I've been playing. I started when I was 12, 13 years old. I wish I was better today than I was back then, but again, when you're raising families and doing jobs and all that, I didn't spend as much time, playing this. Maybe I would have been better today, but I enjoy where I'm at today, and when I play with people, for me now, it's always been about, it's never been about being famous or being, in the categories of Randy Rhoads or Eddie Van Halen or George Lynch or guys like that. It's always been about just getting out and entertaining. It's just fun. For me, it's just a blast. Yeah, of course, if you did something where you brought in a good income or a fair amount of money, would it be cool? Of course. And if you choose that to be your income, of course, absolutely. I think these days you're you got to sell merch, you got to be a studio musician to get paid to play on other people's albums, and you got to constantly tour. This isn't the good old days where the record company made sure they pimped and promoted you, and you got a decent income. Now it's up to you, which I think is really 6 of one, half a dozen of another, right? Because if you're taking care of your own business, then no one can really screw you out of your own stuff. But that, I just want to talk about that real quick today. Yes, I do teach, but I will always push you. If you watch my stuff, I will always push you to the guys mentioned. Again, I'll keep saying their names: Uncle Ben, Andy Wood, Robert Baker, Music Is Win. There are others, and I'm sorry that I don't keep it. Those are my common ones that I go to when I need to educate myself for my students. I watch those guys so I can, have a better understanding. Anyway, that's what this video was about today. Yes, I busted out the Frankenstrat. Mainly because yesterday I woke up wanting to hear some Love Walks In, and I'll end this on the controversial note about the Van Halen eras. When I started listening to music, I've said this once before, I'll say it again. I started off listening to AC/DC, Back in Black, Ozzy Osbourne, Blizzard of Oz. That doesn't mean I hadn't heard Zeppelin, The Doors, and things like that. I'm talking about the ones that really grabbed me. Obviously, Crazy Train, Mr. Crowley, songs like that lured me in. And then Paris is Burning on the Breaking the Chains album. And then, of course, I got into Triumph Allied Forces. No, I can't play any of Rick Emmett stuff. It's just blows my mind. So I listened to Van Halen. They were on in the background. I listened to them. I thought Eddie was good. But I was more in tune with what Randy was doing. I can't play stuff because if I do, they'll just strike this video. But I was more I was more into that versus, doing Eddie stuff. But then, I'm getting to my point. Then the 5150 album came out, Summer Nights. Give it a listen if you haven't really given it a chance because you're so hung up on the early Eddie days. Again, nothing but respect for Eddie on those albums with Dave. I mean, those albums are just, there's no ever, they belong in the every conversation. But for me, it was the 5150 album that really just made me go, wow. Because then I really started. And then I felt like Eddie grew from 5150 onwards. And when I say grew, he was already phenomenal. I mean, grew as in he started kind of venturing into, writing things a little bit more melodic and not more grinded out type stuff. He was now writing melodic, really complicated stuff that sounded really awesome. And of course, for me, Sammy Hagar was always a singer and Dave was always a showman. I said it. I know I'm going to catch havoc and mayhem, whatever. Anyway, that's all I wanted to get on here and say today. I appreciate you, those who stop by and see this. But do yourself a solid. And that is, if you are learning to play one of these pieces of wood with these strings on it, one, study everything you can study. Listen to every guitar player. I don't care if you like them, don't like them. Listen to every style of music. Listen to everything. Go get some theory behind yourself, man, so you understand from the nut down to the bridge, everything that goes on in between. And for those of you that just want to sit around the campfire and strum chords out, yeah, ain't nothing wrong with that either, you know? Go get you a book, look through, you know? I got a student that's fascinated with capos. I've never even showed her a capo, and then all of a sudden I go over to her and she's using capos, and I'm like, what? I don't use a capo. So I introduced slides to her. I said, hey, I took over the, because I keep them on the desk in front of me here. And she's really into just figuring things out on her own, which is super cool. Anyway, I'll end it on this note. If you really want to get an understanding of one of these things, and music, you know what I'm going to tell you. Andy Wood, Uncle Ben Eller, Robert Baker. Music is win. Anyone else? Find them. Look them out. Seek them out. Get your education on. It'll open up the door, the floodgates. Nothing wrong with those of you that are self-taught. I'm self-taught. I'm just saying, if you really want to get your mind just working, just get the smoke coming out the ear holes, go watch those guys, man. Blow my mind every time I watch. In fact, Andy Wood just scares me. He just scares me. That's just ridiculous good. That's just countless hours of nose to the grindstone. You know, that dude wouldn't build just a 4-bedroom house. He'd be building a frickin' mansion. Anyway, have a good week. Stay out of trouble. Go check out those guys. Less watching me shoot the breeze with you and pick this thing up. Well, not this one. It'd be kind of weird. Pick yours up and just have a blasty McBlast. Have a good day, man. Take care.